They are essentially attempting to destroy Nvidia after Bloomberg revealed that the firm had received a DOJ subpoena in an intensifying antitrust inquiry. Nvidia share is being pummeling during the regular session and then again during overtime. Patrick Moorhead will now join us on the newsline for additional strategies and thoughts. It's nice to have you, Pat. What are your thoughts on this antitrust issue with Nvidia? I mean, it seems they're clearly the product leader in A, and so they're winning fair and square what's to investigate. Yeah, this is completely expected, and Nvidia has over 90% of the data center GPU market share when you combine that with the Lina Khan administration. And then I would say the new rules are for what can be proved as being a monopolist. And that is, it's not what you have done, it's what you might do. I like to call that pre-crime, which is pretty new for the past 6 or 7 years out there. Okay, pre-crime, but eventually a judge is going to have to weigh in, I imagine at least. You know, with the U.S., it seems like you being a monopoly having isn't illegal. Abusing monopoly power is right. That's exactly right. And that gets into the new rules. I mean, if you look at 10 years ago, you had to show damages to consumers, to companies, to innovations. And now it has shifted over the past decade to what you might do. It'd be very hard to look back at the marketplace, at history, and demonstrate where Nvidia has abused its monopolistic powers, because that history really does not exist here. Okay, let me sneak in at least one about Intel here in this Lunar Lake launch. I'm seeing some surprise out there about the stats that Intel was rolling out on how this chip performance for thin and light laptops and with battery life overall stacks up versus what AMD and Qualcomm have said. How did you feel about it? So Intel is going to win at some of those metrics. It's going to lose at some of those metrics. Intel demonstrated the ones it won today, and it will be until, I believe, the end of September before we have some independent figures. But in general, they have improved their lot in the notebook life against Qualcomm and Intel. Sometimes we forget that, despite Intel's struggles in appearance, it still holds an 80% market share in the PC market, and this wouldn't be bad for margins and revenue if they can win that client business. I suppose we'll see how your tests and others turn out when those laptops are shipped at the end of this month. Thank you. Pat Moed, Nvidia, and other businesses have received subpoenas from the U.S. Justice Department, which is looking for proof that the chipmaker broke antitrust laws. We should note that we are still expecting word from Nvidia, and Ian King from the DOJ is currently joining us. This is based on sources familiar with the inquiry that our Bloomberg reporters have spoken to. We have a representative from Bloomberg News covering the semiconductor industry. Ian briefly explained to us what they mean when they state that they are looking for proof of antitrust violations. What exactly are they sort of hinting at, right? In this particular case, we've reported a while ago that there was questionnaires going out that they were just sort of asking customers, asking competitors. You know what was going on in the market. The fact that this has gone to the subpoena stage, the legally enforceable request for information, is usually a sign of an escalation in terms of what they might be looking for, things like bundling, things like, taking action, perhaps punitive action against companies that don't use it exclusively, that perhaps look at other alternative suppliers, because as we know, Nvidia has a very, very tight control over the supply chain for a particularly important product at this point. And when we talk about the DOJ making inquiries into these kinds of issues in the past, you and Lee Nyan reported that the U.S. opened antitrust investigations into both Microsoft and Nvidia. At the time, did we have a good sense of what it was specifically that they were looking into? Yeah, I mean, in general, every government, every regulator around the world is looking at AI as being not only extremely fast-growing, but also extremely important with all kinds of economic and indeed security implications. So our understanding at the time was, there were things like Nvidia's purchase of a small AI startup. There was obviously Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI, that all of these things that the sense was that regulators wanted to get ahead of this, didn't want anything to become too entrenched before they had a close look. Let me ask you a kind of a dumb question, Ian, but when you say this idea that there's concern here that Nvidia is making it hard to switch to other suppliers, or penalizing buyers that don't sort of use exclusively Nvidia's products, are there competing products out there, I mean at least in mass, that these companies would even be able to go to? No, that's a very good question, Romain. I mean, clearly Nvidia is way ahead, but you got to bear in mind company, like Amazon AWS, for example. Now, this is just an example. This doesn't have any relevance to our reporting. They do their own networking. They do their own servers, so Nvidia, and as we know, supplies all of those things, networking servers and the chips itself. So what could be under investigation, what we believe is under investigation, is the relationship between the supply given to those that aren't exclusive uses of its stuff, and of course AMD is in the market as well with accelerators and with your decades of experience covering semiconductors both in Asia and in the US. You've seen this happen before where the government takes a closer look and starts sending some pay. How do you expect this? What do you expect as the next step? What will you be looking for in terms of how quickly this might move? That is something that's difficult to say. What we can say is that clearly regulators are very keen to have a look at this particular area and to act quickly before it becomes entrenched like we saw in the past with certain Microsoft products, like with Google search years down the line. They start to take a look at it. This one feels much more on point and an effort to sort of get involved right at the beginnings almost of an industry worst day since September 2022, dragged lower by everything from the Mag 7 to semiconductor stocks. It was really the semiconductor stocks that took it on the nose. Joining us right now with his outlook for the sector and his squawk picks is Paul Meeks. He's Harvest Portfolio Management CIO. And Paul, how you feeling about this in the aftermath? So what I think is going to happen is we'll have a repeat of what happened only a month ago. And so if you take a look at the bellwether stock Nvidia, a month ago it did close at about 98, 99, even got lower than that in early August in the in-day move. And so we'll see how it goes. I imagine that we'll retest. And if we successfully retest, that then I'd probably go in and become an aggressive buyer again. Because in the last month or so, we had their quarterly earnings report. We had some other data. And of course, the company is going to slow a little bit, but it's still growing at a really good rate. The outlook is very bright. And I think the only thing that's really new that changes the thesis, and I don't really think it changes it at all, is the subpoena that they've received from the Department of Justice, which is typical in the technology sector, when angry competitors start complaining to the government. So I actually think it's a pretty good buying opportunity after with the smoke clears here, and I hope it's fairly soon today. It looks like the stock's going to open up at 106. That means it's trading at 29 times on next year's earnings for 42% earnings growth, which is a nice discount, whereas the S&P 500 is trading at 20 plus times earnings. It's probably trading at a PEG ratio of about 3 times, and the PEG ratio for Nvidia is about 60-70%. So I actually think it's quite attractive. That's what I'm trying to figure. You would buy it today, or you would wait, and holding it for years. So I'm not adding to it. But if new money comes in today, I think you have to get started. I'm not sure where it will go in the short term, but I'm very confident that if you bought it today, a year from now, you'll feel great because we've got you covered. Check out our website to access over 5,000 top model collections and enjoy premium content without the ongoing fees. Why pay more when you can enjoy endless entertainment without recurring fees? Select us now to avoid worrying about future subscriptions.